This is the Fifth Estate winning headlines, your media police post. Brought to you by the Fort Hall School of Government, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning. But we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 18th of May, 2020, and I am 2J.
I'm Tom.
And I am DM. Let's take a look at today's headlines. On the Daily Nation, inside plan to push RUTO into opposition. The Standard, RUTO breaks the silence.
Yes.
And finally, the Star, Mudavadi, why I can't work with Uhuru's Jubilee.
Yes.
Let's begin with the Daily Nation, heavily political
Yes.
across the dailies today.
Yeah.
So the Daily Nation is telling us that they have learned of secret plans to block RUTO from ascending to power and force him into the opposition come 2022.
Yeah.
They're also saying that there's a scheme led by ODM's Raila Odinga, Gideon Moi, Kalonzo Musyoka and others where they intend to join and work with President Kenyatta, Kenyatta's government ahead of 2022 as part of his succession plan. And within this plan is the support for the planned referendum.
Yeah.
So 2022 will, according to the Nation, by then we will have a new opposition leader in the name of William Ruto.
And it's starting to sound like one. But you know what, DM? I'm starting to think maybe Uhuru Kenyatta's strategy is not to actually have William Ruto in the opposition. And he's probably taking some advice from President Lyndon Johnson, LBJ, that's what they used to call him, 1971. Talking of a dangerous rival, he said it's probably better to have him inside the tent pissing out than having him outside the tent pissing in. And you know why? You see, William Ruto right now, he lives in a government house. He's driven in government cars. Literally, he is within the purview of the state. And therefore, everything he does is being checked. He's being, he's being monitored. And he can be contained. He can be contained.
So what you're saying to him is that Ruto is not an opposition leader you would want to have if you were leading this country. Forget Raila, he'll give you big headaches.
I don't think he would be as strong as Raila.
You know what's getting me thinking? I think 2 weeks ago our final thought focused on critical thinking. And I think that there is a complete lapse of critical thinking happening somewhere. I don't know if it's the media, like a concerted effort to not see that impeachment is the end game, or if it's just general fear to say that that could be one of the potential strategies. But I think for the past couple of weeks we've been saying this on the table, impeachment is the end game. And somehow the Daily Nation today has decided to give us that revelation that we indeed had said was going to happen. I think people need to wake up and smell the roses.
No, absolutely. And you're right, Sujay. Usually coalitions are formed pre-election. But if there's a coalition in formation right now, and I think there is, it's being formed post-election. It's when the members of the coalition know how many members of parliament they have in the National Assembly. They know how many senators they are. They know that if they aggregate and consolidate these numbers, they will have enough to undertake an impeachment, as Tuje, you're saying. And the plan is so evident. I mean,
so obvious.
Last week, it was the rearrangement of the political leadership in the Senate. Now they have told us, Tuja himself told us that what is coming next is a rearrangement of the political leadership in Parliament.
Precisely.
For what purpose, we ask once again, is so that an impeachment can sail like the wind through Parliament and glide like oil through the Senate, and this is what is going to happen. We have a three-part criteria that we use to analyze the headlines for you. We ask, is it topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? And finally, is the headline thoughtful or is it just plain lazy? What do we have in the Standard?
In the Standard, Ruto breaks the silence. So apparently there was a private meeting held in Nairobi where William Ruto was the chair, and he held it with his allies. And he told them that now for us to survive, we need to do four things. First, dismiss the purge that Uhuru Kenyatta has undertaken within Jubilee.
Wait, Tuem, you need to call it the way the DP apparently called it.
The
survival kit.
Yeah, his survival kit is a DP's survival kit because he knows there's a storm coming. So he told them 4 things. First, dismiss the purge which Uhuru Kenyatta has undertaken within Jubilee. Second, he advised he advised Duale and Kindiki to, in case there's any pressure that mounts for their removal in Parliament and Senate, that they should bow to pressure and leave the seats. And then third, that he will not attack Uhuru in public. Fourth,
only in private?
Only in private or behind closed doors or curtains. And fourth, a tactical retreat. And he asked his appointment to avoid frontal attacks on the emerging coalition to plot a comeback. Now, in my view, guys, I think RUTO is digging in, and he probably could be going to the opposition. And the reason I say this is that there was a statement made, I think it was on Friday or Saturday, by Hassan Omar, Boni Kalwale, and Johnson Muthama. And from that statement, this is what they said. They said, it is clear from the behavior of those mobilizing against freedom, rule of law, and the Constitution that COVID is no longer a crisis. We must therefore be ready to face them in valiant resistance and win our freedom for our own sake and for the sake of posterity. This looks like a statement that would be made at Orange House. But I don't think William Ruto can necessarily be a better opposition leader than Raila Odinga. Why? Because Raila Odinga has two things two things for him as an opposition leader. First, he can summon numbers in formal institutions like Parliament. But second, he can also summon informal institutions like people in Kibera to throw rocks and do a resistance. I don't think the Kalenjins in Eldoret North are very capable of throwing stones in Nairobi. Yeah.
All right. I think if we look at the Star, it has more opposition talk.
Yeah.
Mudavadi, why I won't work with Uhuru's Jubilee. So the Star is telling us, this is actually an exclusive interview that they had with him. Mudavadi is saying that he wants to market himself in 2022 without the baggage of incumbency.
Yeah.
So he says that he's ruled out a post-election coalition deal with Jubilee, even this despite whatever decisions Raila Odinga seems to be making. So they talk about how ANC has 17 MPs and 3 senators, and that they cannot partner with Jubilee in a coalition until they write to the registrar of political parties seeking to pull out of that NASA agreement. He also says that ODM have their own plans. Whatever Raila Odinga is doing is not the position of ODM, and that eventually he sees that he wants to become the opposition chief. Quite interesting.
I think Mudavadi is playing hard to get.
I think he's looking for a lot of attention right now.
He is plain lying. And he said that he wants to market himself in 2022 without the baggage of incumbency. Since when is incumbency baggage? It is high political currency. I don't know where he's reading from.
He knows he's being sneaky here, and he knows very well that his political spine is very wavy. He can say one statement
his spine
on Friday.
Is wavy.
Yes, political spine is wavy. He can make a statement on Friday. I will not be in BBI, but Saturday morning he'll appear in Narok saying hi to people at a BBI rally. So he's playing hard to get.
Yeah.
Well, which daily gives us our best political headlines today?
The Standard.
I'm opposed to the Standard. I think it's pure speculation.
I mean, what do people want to hear from Ruto right now?
Of course, they would want to hear something from him, but we do not know that he actually spoke. We're just being told from an insider that he gave them a survival kit.
You're right, Tuje. However, if we apply our criteria, the Standard actually wins. It is topical. Although it is speculative, as you're saying, it is groundbreaking because no other daily has come out to say what Ruto has apparently responded to what is happening. And it is thoughtful because it's deceiving people to buy the paper.
So good 2 out of 3. Fair enough.
The Standard then gives us our winning headline. And onto the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. And just like the headlines, we have a 3-part criteria that we use to analyze them for you. We ask, is the cartoon humorous or dry? Is it satirical or pessimistic? And finally, is it effective or just plain lazy? What do we have in
the Daily Nation? You have Iga, and this one I like. He has a drawing of Sunny. Sunny is
our old friend.
Our old friend, but now it's a Jubilee Sunny. And he's been demolishing political parties. First demolished KANU, now demolished NAC, then demolished CORD, now demolished NASA. And he's on his way. I don't know whether he'll demolish himself But yes, political demolitions. I don't think, and I think this is in the context of what's been happening in Roy and Kariobangi.
That's why it made me cringe, actually.
Yeah.
So I thought that it's a bit in bad taste to.
Yeah, to have it. I
don't know what you think, or if I'm overthinking it.
I know, I definitely agree. Yeah.
I sort of agree.
Can we just toss that just very quickly?
Yes.
All right.
Tossed. In the Standard, we have a caricature of a man holding a butcher's knife with blood on it, and he's standing over 3 very scared chickens. And the chickens have the head of Duale, of the Mumias East MP Benjamin Washiali, and possibly the Kikuyu MP Kimani Ishungwa, and they are shaking in their feathers.
That actually looks like Kindiki.
Kindiki, exactly. I think actually it is. So, and this is in the wake of the purge being apparently headed to the National Assembly.
Yeah, absolutely.
As Tuju and Murathe confirmed that there is a cleanup. And so behind the man there you can see a chopping block, and it looks like it has
and a chicken bone that
senatorial
has been
blood.
Cleaned. This is Kaso.
Kaso. This is very humorous.
Fantastic. It is. It's so good.
It's humorous
it's very good.
And true.
And true, yeah. I think we put in the parking bay while we look at.
Absolutely. The Star. And you have Ozone, you have a caricature of Uhuru Kenyatta. And he, and also as well, they arrested Felicien Kabuga, who was arrested in Paris, I think during the weekend. And Uhuru is, that's a tip measure, right? And he's extending the curfew, correct? And now there's a French hand with a French flag on it, and that is nabbing Kabuga as well. What's the theory here?
Ozone, Ozone had gotten so good. Remember last year I had this issue with him of like the obviousness, the mixed metaphors, too literal. He's gone all the way back to that.
I don't know, is he making a comparison between the French and the Kenyan government, because Kabuga was rumored to be in Kenya, which may not be true, or to have spent some part of that 25 years in Kenya, and the Kenyan government didn't catch him, but Uhuru Kenyatta has not been president for 25 years. And he's comparing the long arm of Uhuru, which is just extending the curfew, and the French government is doing the...
You know the suggestion when you talk of the long arm of the law, it's supposed to be a negative thing, unless there's negative sentiments around the extension of the curfew, which I don't think there should be. And the French government arresting a war criminal. I think there was 2 hot stories over the weekend, and he tried to mash them up together.
I think Kaso's is humorous.
I'd go with Kaso's.
Satirical, and it's very effective.
Yes.
So Kaso of the Standard gives us our winning cartoon. So what is our final thought?
And now our final thought. It is inspired by Abraham Lincoln's House Divided speech of 1858.
Yeah, so this week we're going to be looking at some of the greatest speeches ever given in history, and kind of just look at what made them so important, what made them so special, and what makes them still important today. So as 2M said, we're going to start with Abraham Lincoln's House Divided speech. So I'll just read the most famous excerpt that comes from the speech. A house divided against itself cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure permanently half slave, half free. I do not expect the union to be dissolved. I do not expect the house to fall. But I do expect it will cease to be divided. It will become all one thing or all the other. Either the opponents of slavery will arrest the further spread of it and place it where the public mind shall rest, in the belief that it is in the course of ultimate extinction. Or its advocates will push it forward, till it shall become lawful in all the states, old as well as new, north as well as south. So on 16th of June, 1858, more than 1,000 delegates met in Springfield, Illinois for the Republican Senate Convention. At 5 p.m., they chose Abraham Lincoln as their candidate for U.S. Senate, running against Democrat Stephen A. Douglas. Later at 8 p.m., Lincoln delivered this speech to his Republican colleagues. On this day, he delivered what is known as one of the most important addresses in U.S. history, his House Divided speech, where he accepted the Republican nomination for Senate. And this speech actually marked his entrance into national politics at a time when the nation was at odds over slavery. So just a bit of context, in the first half of the 19th century, the United States became increasingly torn over the debate of slavery. The economy of the southern states were largely dependent on the labor of enslaved African Americans. On the other side, you have the northern states who used wage labor. They actually hired workers and paid them for their work. So these two sides developed distinct social and economic systems and very divergent political views. At that time, the US was so divided that many feared that the country would break out into a civil war, a fear that Lincoln, through this speech, unwittingly tapped into. As soon as he used those words, a house divided, he articulated a fear that many had in the country, that the slavery controversy was going to lead to some sort of civil war. And of course, nobody paid attention to the sentences he said thereafter. He said, "I believe this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free." And so immediately he said that, people thought that he was calling for a civil war. So on the campaign trail, his opponent Douglas used this perception that Lincoln was advocating for war against him, and he denounced him for inciting territorial conflict. While this House divided speech propelled Lincoln into the national attention, he actually ended up losing this election. It made him sound too radical on the subject of slavery, even to people who were opposed to slavery. They just didn't want to have this idea of a civil war being used against them. 2 years later, in 1960, Lincoln actually ended up winning the Republican nomination for president, and then he won the election. And one of the opposing candidates was the person he ran against for Senate, Douglas. And in response to Lincoln's victory for the presidential election, 11 southern states seceded from the Union, and this was actually the start of the American Civil War.
Fantastic. At the time he was reading this speech in 1858, I would have called America DSA, the Divided States of America. And this is because largely of the imminent crisis that was going to follow. But when he was reading this speech as well, he began the speech by predicting the calamity that would befall America. And just allow me to read the phrase that he said. He said, "If we could first know where we are and whither we are tending, we could then better judge what to do and how to do it. I believe this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free." Now, I think he had this vision of America as one, but he also said that America belonged to the Union before they belonged to political parties. And in his first inaugural speech about 3 years later, in 1861, the one that you referred to, he called the Union perpetual and much older than the Constitution, and that no state upon its own mere motion can lawfully get out of the Union, saying, I mean, we exist, yes, as part of so many nations, but then there is one collective that makes us the state. And this he took from a man called George Washington's farewell address of 1796, which he warned America that the spirit of the party is a prime threat to the Union, a main prop of our liberty. And I also want to ground that to what we have here in Kenya. We've been so divided politically, and that's because we have taken up our ethnic belonging and our ethnic identity and chosen to have that, attachment to ethnic coalitions rather than to have to the mother union, the state itself. And that maybe that is what has actually made us stay behind all this long, because you have Gema, you have Luos, you have the Luya nation, and they're all represented by political parties.
Those divisions are perpetual.
Those divisions are perpetual. And what we should realize is also our state, our union, and our existence is actually, it exists, it pre-exists our own constitution. And I think we should pay allegiance to our mother union rather than to our different ethnic nations.
Absolutely, that is so true. So there are two big lessons that we took away from, or that we can take away from the Abraham Lincoln speech. And the first one is that what this speech demonstrates is that it's important to take a stand. Neutrality never serves anybody. Sitting on the, if you sit on a fence, you will never make significant contributions. And Lincoln took a stand, and his speech formed the basis or part of the basis for the abolition of slavery. The second thing is that it's important to be unafraid. The stance that Lincoln took at that time was not popular, and it was not easy. I mean, his opponent, as Tuje has said, was open to compromising, to saying that all the states can choose if they want to continue with slavery, adopt slavery, or to not have slavery at all. And it was also not a popular stance that Abraham Lincoln took because of dollars. Slaves equaled money for regular Americans, but also for rich industrialists, because of course that was free labor, that was their bread and butter. But Abraham Lincoln went down in history as an important figure because he was unafraid and decisive.
Right.
So as Tuje mentioned, the national attention he gained from that speech, even though he lost the election, the senatorial election that year, propelled him to the presidency in 1860s. Tuje also said, in 1860 rather, that Lincoln's words were prophetic because there really was a civil war right after he got into the presidency. But I also think that they're prophetic up to now. I think to that the USA is now again the DSA, the divided states of America, because there's a lot of undercurrents of division. They have a very radical presidency and have all sorts of issues, predominantly race. Do you think that Lincoln also predicted the House divided in Kenya in Jubilee today? Thank you for watching. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are also on your TV screens on Star Times, Go TV, and Pang Free to Air. Have a good evening on a day when we had a winning headline from the Standard and a winning cartoon from the Daily Nation. See you tomorrow.